Ever wonder why 95% of leads do not convert? Why cold call rates are down and prospects don't open our emails? Why our responses of robocalls and implanting pixels to track user interaction, mostly without permission, is backfiring spectacularly? Well, that's what we intend to find out here in the Buyer Side Chat podcast. There are scores of podcasts about selling, but most miss the shift that has come upon the buying-selling process. The initiative has since moved from the supply to the demand side. The Buyer Side Chat, your podcast of record for B2B buying, talks to actual buyers, persons, not personas, in the quest to understand the real buyer's journey, their trials and tribulations, challenges and outcomes they're striving for. Welcome to the Buyer Side Chat. Thank you for your time and for joining us in this session. I have a favor to ask. While you continue to listen to the podcast, please leave a comment or rating at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts from. I personally look at each comment and will give you a shout out to each of you in our following episodes. It means a lot to hear from you. Today, we have with us Roger Mader, co-founder and managing partner of Ampersand, where he practices growth by design.
30 years ago, the Miller-Hyman method was a smart idea, which basically said understand all the buyers and understand their preferences. More recently, consultative selling, which is a different label for much the same thing. All of them I see as teaching us to operate like a good doctor. Our job is to diagnose the pain and then to prescribe a solution. So if you step into this relationship with the unbiased desire to improve the health of your patient, that you are now no longer flogging the product that you sell. You are now diagnosing need. And now you're an expert in the particular product you sell, but if you were really their advocate, you might even send them to a competitor. There would be times, if you were completely unbiased, that you would say, you know what, you're buying a Mercedes and you really only need, a low-end Subaru. For the features that you're looking for, are you sure you want the Mercedes? I will be happy to sell you the Mercedes, but it's going to come at a margin, and there'll be these differences, and I need to make sure that those differences are justified in the cost. You'll win loyalty, you'll earn respect, you'll get referrals to the people who are really in the market for Mercedes from that person. That's the challenge, that you are foregoing possibly today's sale in order to have two sales tomorrow.
As co-founder of Ampersand, Roger works with senior executives to unlock the potential of their companies, to redeploy their assets to a higher return, producing uncommon growth by uncommon means. From an early career on the launch teams for the IBM personal computer and first generation of Accenture's change management practice, Roger co-founded Via International and built a global growth strategy, organization design, and change management consultancy. He guided strategy and new service design for Ernst and Young. He served as SVP Global Accounts in the consulting practice for business objects, now SAP, in San Jose and Paris. He led global accounts for design strategy firm Doblin Monitor, now Deloitte, and led commercial strategy for innovation agency Fahrenheit 212, now Cap Gemini. He also served as the global chief marketing officer for Subway. Roger has been retained by CEO Trevor Haynes to craft brand purpose and architecture, reorganize the marketing function, elevate and integrate digital channels, and transform brand communication for the world's largest franchise restaurant enterprise. Now, onto this insightful episode with Roger Mader. Roger, welcome to the Buyer Side Chat. I'm delighted to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for what you can later judge as being my expertise in the sales process. But I'm delighted to discuss it with you because I do find that it is always changing, and we make the mistake of believing it to be predictable when in fact it is very fluid. Like any other human dance, it is a very fluid exercise. And I think increasingly complex because of the different aspirations of the different participants in the process, who can also regularly be changing, even in the same transaction.
Yes.
So, yes, more than happy to do that.
The first question that I have for you is that I believe that the buyer who was engaging with the salesperson 20 years back with whatever information sources he had, whatever requirements he had, and so on, and the relationships he had at the ground level with the salesperson has completely changed. And today the buyer is actually more informed, more empowered with information than a single salesperson is, and thereby that this whole information asymmetry, which used to be the reason of engagement, has vanished. I mean, like so many other things in the internet.
It has not vanished. It has changed considerably. Let me give you an example that is, potentially unique to the bizarre open market of healthcare in the United States. To try and give it a kind of consumer perspective for our listeners that we can all relate to, if you've ever seen the news items on our from our increasingly crazy country about the challenges that people have in seeking out healthcare and receiving very different levels of service and very different prices for equivalent services, what you'll find is the information asymmetry of the past meant that the doctor was the expert, the patient arrived and did as the doctor told them. Today, what you find is that people are informed or misinformed, very often deeply flawed in their interpretation of information because they don't have, an advanced degree to understand and interpret it. They don't have the nuance of experience in something that is as fluid as medical sciences. And they don't appreciate the fact that doctors don't actually know the answers and don't pretend to. They have to navigate their way by testing, seeking out pain, trying to understand cause, prescribe something, see if it works, call me in the morning, and we'll try the next thing. So patients who are under the mistaken belief that they have the answer and know what needs to be done end up being like Elvis Presley and Michael Jackson and prescribing their own solutions. And having a complacent and compliant doctor for that does not end up well for the patient or the doctor. So I think there is information asymmetry, but it is not as simple as I didn't know it before, now I know it. I can seek out answers, and I often will be misinformed. I will be underinformed, which, if you think about it, requires that the expert is even more expert now, because they not only have to navigate the truth, they also have to navigate my psychosis about thinking that I know the answers. That's one extreme. The other extreme is that I am so well informed that I am expert, and now I am, negotiating from a different power position, and I need my sales representative to take on a different role. It's to help me navigate my decision to apply our mutual expertise to my best. It's literally like going from a basic course to an advanced course in the acquisition process. And we have seen a very similar parallel in the West. I'd be interested to know if this has happened in India. I'm sure it's happened in lots of different markets. But again, another consumer example would be the way that we used to shop for an automobile in the United States was that you would get basically managed by the sales rep who had the power and was, there were a small number of brands. You pretty much knew the brand that fit you, and you would go into the shop, and the salesperson's job was to upsell you. And everyone knew that that was a strong arm tactic and hated it. Over time, more brands proliferated, alternatives proliferated, single price options arrived. Lexus arrived in the United States under a different model entirely and transformed the purchase experience, where they basically designed a beautiful line of cars, but their breakthrough was in coming to the US was they designed the luxury car for people who don't care about cars and optimized everything around the service experience and did brilliant things that Toyota, as a continuous improvement company, would do, like they paid their sales reps on the second car that you purchased. You get bonus on the second car, not the first, so that there was a built-in series of mechanisms that would encourage you as a sales representative to build a relationship, to ensure high service, et cetera. And they have, to this day, some of the most loyal, some of the highest brand loyalty, largely driven by service and not by the car. So what do we take from these couple of examples into the B2B space? What we see is a pivot to buyer power. The buyers come in with greater authority, and sometimes misinformed in their sense of authority. The other challenge is that the buyer is now equipped with a slew of partners. It's for a big enough you're going through. For a large enough amount, you might go through a multi-tier approval system. Each of the participants in that decision have different criteria that you have to meet. So you're threading the needle between I'm selling for quality here, I'm selling for cost over there, and everything in between, service and long-term value and immediate value. And very often those participants are invisible to you if you have not tried to make them explicit. This is why long-term relationships help so much, because you begin to learn the players, you begin to learn the gauntlet you have to run, you understand the measures that help your buyers win so you can optimize for that. It's a little bit like writing your own RFP, request for proposal, by over time understanding the purchase game, if you will. So I see that as the increasing sophistication and the growth in options. Both have taken power away from the seller and put it in the hands of the buyer. And as who is the sales rep, if you will, who I see as kind of our target audience for this conversation, it requires a different kind of calculus than the simple linear step-by-step path approach. Even sophisticated, 30 years ago, the Miller-Hyman method was a smart idea, which basically said understand all the buyers and understand their preferences. More recently, consultative selling, which is a different label for much the same thing. All of them I see as teaching us to operate like a good doctor, which is why I used the medical example before. Our job is to diagnose the pain and then to prescribe a solution. So if you step into this relationship with the unbiased desire to improve the health of your patient, that you are now no longer flogging the product that you sell. You are now diagnosing need. And now you're an expert in the particular product you sell, but if you were really their advocate, you might even send them to a competitor. There would be times, if you were completely unbiased, that you would say, you know what, you're buying a Mercedes and you really only need, a low-end Subaru for the features that you're looking for. Are you sure you want the Mercedes? I will be happy to sell you the Mercedes, but it's going to come at a margin, and there'll be these differences. And I need to make sure that those differences are justified in the cost. You'll win loyalty, you'll earn respect, you'll get referrals to the people who are really in the market for Mercedes from that person. That's the challenge, that you are foregoing possibly today's sale in order to have two sales tomorrow.
I totally agree. In fact, it's very strange you say this, because I actually shared a piece of advice today with the community, and I said if you cannot fulfill the entire need of a customer, the best thing is to walk away. If you half fulfill it, it's going to come back and bite you in a much larger problem down the line, where the management of that company and your management, everybody's going to get involved, and this $50,000 deal which you thought you made would become a very expensive deal for your company. So I'm delighted that you make this point. However, I have a question, and this comes up quite a few times. We talk about this, that we should be able to diagnose the pain, right? And I think that's a very ambitious statement, because
it's fair.
The buyers, the role has changed, because they no longer are the pure procurement guys who are only there to negotiate with you. They are subject matter experts themselves. They possibly have gone to the same engineering schools or management schools that the salesperson has gone to. And not only that, the buyer is not alone. They, as you rightly again pointed out, that there are multiple people in a decision having multiple agendas, whether it's cost, whether it is stack compatibility, tech compatibility, usability, so on and so forth. Everybody is driving at different metrics, and you are threading the needle to ensure that all of them are aligned. How do you reconcile this? Because when I'm talking to people, these are guys who are not only talking to this particular salesperson, he's actually talking to 3 other vendors he has shortlisted. And there are smart people there as well who are trying to do the exactly same thing. So he's learning very, very quickly, as well as he has access to experts internally, and they have access to experts who are quote unquote neutral parties, right? Who are subject matter experts who are walking in and saying, okay, this is the ERP that you should be going for, or these are the criterions that should be part of your RFP and so on, right? So how do you then become the preferred doctor or the person who is going to diagnose? How do you get there?
So let's use the 3 different ERP systems as your base example. I think there's several elements of the process, not necessarily sequential steps. One is know the competition. And I think all good sales folks know that they need to be able to compare and contrast. You need to be able to line up the 3 systems, show the features that the customer cares about, show why yours is beneficially positioned. And I think be prepared to, your competitors are going to point out your weaknesses. So better for you to address them first and talk about how you address them. And bring a big name client into the conversation, their name into the conversation to show how they've addressed that and why it's really not an issue. And I think be prepared to lose on some features in order to win by emphasizing others. Because in fact, you never represent the perfect solution for anyone, no matter which of those competitors you work for. So it's about optimizing for their needs. And I think the best physician is the one who does the best job of diagnosing pain and understanding cause. So it's more about asking questions than it is about having answers. It's more about positioning options for them and letting them demonstrate to you where their preferences lie. And I think if you're a really good doctor, it's also about educating. It's about helping them understand why they're undervaluing a feature today that you know will be important to them tomorrow, so that you can get them to make a decision that's more holistic, if you will. Because we tend to do very, as human beings, we are not a very well-evolved machine for the lives that we lead. We watch squirrels save nuts better than humans do. What I mean is we tend to be very short-term thinking. We tend to make decisions without forecasting the future, without forecasting change. When we do forecast, we do it linearly, which is never correct. We tend to use 1 or 2 variables, not 200. So I think the other great benefit you can bring is the wisdom of your past clients who've already installed your ERP system, who've run into the issues that they're concerned about and have addressed them. And if you have a testimonial, and particularly in our lives now where we are operating through screens, you can throw up a video immediately and have the voice of the customer helping to assuage their concerns. I do personally find that having references that I can call upon in order to testify on behalf of my solution is very helpful, because obviously our buyers are interested in the perceptions of their peers for the same reason that when we buy online, we want to see other customers' reviews. And we don't, in B2B, we seldom make that available to them unless they're buying online.
This is a great point. We talk of building trust, and I have this point I make every time, that 95% of all sales tech uses customers' behavior tracking surreptitiously. They don't take permission. They're not saying that I'm tracking what you're watching. I'm not, but I'm reporting to you. I'm not, they don't say I'm going to tell your vendor who you have shared this deck with, but they sell it to the vendor because the vendor is paying as a feature, as a you will know who all it has been shared with and so on. I think there's a fundamental disconnect about how we are going about building trust, and also that we feel that building trust is cheap and easy.
Right. So there are 2 features in that very useful insight that occurred to me. One is that trust is built on truth. Truth is best displayed through transparency. So what you've just described is I've created an opaque relationship where I'm using you and not telling you, you are like the worst date ever. You basically have just described the characteristics of a stalker.
Yeah.
So no one wants to date that guy. And so if you're going to exhibit those behaviors, you should expect that you will have the same outcomes as a stalker. You will capture your prey now, and you will be hunted by the police later, because it's just a really poor transaction model to use. I don't mean to describe it as so nefarious, but it is literally the way that the sales business has thought about itself forever. The profession has thought about itself as hunting prey.
Yeah.
It's literally, it is literally like I'm going to shoot a mammal and eat it for dinner. For God's sake, no one wants to be the deer in this scenario. So I think the truth and transparency are paramount in order to achieve trust, and are antithetical to a number of sales models that are out there, which are kind of based on, taking advantage. The other thing that I wanted to our sales professionals to consider listening to the show is that the sales reps at Lexus didn't choose to be paid on the second sale. Many of them had come from other dealerships and found this aggravating. So wait, I'm not going to get a bonus for maybe years? What are you talking? So what Lexus had to do was pay them a higher base and have a smaller bonus. Very different, a more expensive model for Lexus to operate, but it was machining trust into the mechanism. But the reps wouldn't have done it themselves. And my point is, we need leaders to step up and say, if we believe that we should have trusted relationships, then let's stop rewarding our reps to create distrustful relationships.
Yes.
If you do not make the mechanism match your objectives, you're going to go off the road. And it's your own doing. And sales leaders fail to recognize this all the time. By the way, I also think, in a very sexist way, against men, I think this is also indicative of testosterone poisoning. That there is a very male agenda that has informed sales forever. It comes with this hunter and prey kind of methodology that is not about authentic relationships. And I expect, I don't have data to prove this, but I expect that as you find an increasing number of women as senior leaders in sales organizations, what you will find is a greater transparency, trust, long-standing relationships, and all the indications of trusted relationships in place, because they are not raised on the model of hunt and kill. That's obviously highly simplistic, and someone will shoot me for that themselves. But I do think that in all things, broader, diverse participation on the seller side will do a better job of matching the broader, diverse cast of characters on the buy side, and we will be more likely to build trusting, long-standing relationships that are not built on exploitation.
I'll talk to a few leaders in sales who are women, and I'm going to sort of probe this with them, this idea, because I can totally get it. Women come from nurturing, right? So that's I mean, again, this is a sexist kind of statement, but women are more nurturing than men. I mean, I think, yeah, okay, this is a great point.
The women I know are more nurturing than the men I know. We'll put it that way. That's just fact. That's just fact-based data.
Yes.
Might not be descriptive of the entire world.
True. I agree. Yeah, and there are always exceptions. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's time for a short break. Roger made a great point about how women are better at building trust. On the back of this, I asked Roger what are the changes he's observing in B2B buyers. Roger explains after the break. Stay with us.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end.
Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Right before the break, I asked our guest Roger Mader, co-founder and managing partner at Ampersand, what changes is he witnessing in the buyers? Let's find out. That brings me to the question of how you are seeing buyers actually evolving. What is resonating with the buyers according to you today?
So I have operated on both sides of the transaction. I have been a consultant my entire life, really, my entire professional life, starting in big consulting with Accenture, and I worked in strategy with EY. And then I've had my own consulting firms, one in the last century and Ampersand in the current. And I also recently had the opportunity to serve one of my clients as their global chief marketing officer, where I was receiving, lots of sales pitches from agencies and software makers and mobile device manufacturers and mobility trackers and all the things that you would expect would be necessary for gaining insight into consumers and understanding how to build a transaction with them. This was with Subway, the global sandwich shop, if you will,
Yes.
the world's largest restaurant franchise, and undergoing a really interesting transformation in India. Like many U.S. companies, they were born of a U.S. model that they tried to export to the world, which is a little bit like McDonald's trying to sell hamburgers in India. If you do not pivot to match the needs and preferences and tastes profiles of your buyers, you're going to not do very well. So the opportunity that I had there was as the buyer. My experience selling was that I'm selling a service. I was taking the physician's model. I am going to go in diagnostically and understand need. I'm going to be very transparent when a customer or a prospective client gives me a request for proposal and I think it's stupid. They're asking for, they're trying to solve this problem. They're asking for one component, and I will then say, let's put the RFP aside for a second and let's presume we're not going to work together because I wouldn't do what you just advised a group not to do. I'm not going to sell you a 50% solution because you're going to not be satisfied, and then it's my fault. So what I'm going to do is tell you what you need to do. And, more times than not, what happens then is you build a trusted relationship, you help them reconsider what they need to do, and you're in a very good position to continue to advise them. But if not, you've at least walked away from that as a known, trusted, objective expert who's in their corner, not your own. And I love that position because I don't intend to die tomorrow. I am more than happy for people to call me back next year for the next project or next month. As the buyer, and I tell you, as the global chief marketing officer for one of the biggest consumer brands in the world and most familiar ones, you get a lot of phone calls. You get a lot of pitches. And what I found almost invariably was someone made a hammer and they were coming to sell me a hammer. They didn't care if I used nails for anything. We have the best hammer you've ever seen. And I was like, hello, did I ask for a hammer? Do I even talk to you about fastening boards together? What are you talking about? The better version was the hammer manufacturer who contacted me, often through a trusted source, and said, I'd like to talk to you about how you fasten boards together. Some people use nails, some people use screws, but somehow you got to, and they will be worthy of engaging in a conversation because they might have something, they might know something I don't. And at the end of that, if they learn that I fasten boards with screws and they're selling hammers, they will recommend me to everybody. They will go back to their boss and say, 9 times out of 10, when I'm trying to sell a hammer, my clients need a screwdriver. We should probably sell screwdrivers too. We should probably build a partnership with the screwdriver manufacturing company. We should at the very least, not sell hammers to people who are going to pound screws into wood, because we're not going to be well received. We're going to have terrible reviews. Our sales will go down next year, not this year. And it is very few, in my experience, sales representatives who have the power, the authority, the agency to have that upward conversation. So what I would do sometimes is do that for them. If I saw someone coming to me with a bad idea, I'd say, no, I'm not interested in your hammer. Do you sell screwdrivers? No, you don't sell screwdrivers. You should go have this conversation with your boss. Come back to me when you sell screwdrivers. I'm not interested. Sorry for the simplistic analogy, but I can't really go into the details of Subway's purchasing. And the next thing that happens is I get a phone call from, or a request for a meeting from the head of the hammer company who wants to talk, who says thank you and wants to talk about screwdrivers and, what would the best screwdriver look like for you? And if they're really enterprising, they don't start making screwdrivers. They go build a partnership with whoever makes them best, and they get a cut of that deal, and they create the introductions. And now all of a sudden they've got a consortium solution that is truly solving my problem, not selling me hammers, which is going to fail all day. That person who makes that, who elevates the conversation and solves my problem is almost always, in my experience, a founder of the company. It is a person who is still an entrepreneur. When it's a big company and that founder is, long gone or 3 steps away from the sales rep, there's no access to someone who's willing to change the program to meet the needs of the customer. And so one of the reasons why, as a consultant, I work with both big companies and small is because the big companies have so much to learn from still being entrepreneurial and scrappy and listening and pivoting. And it's very hard for them to do because of entrenched assets and systems. But the small companies are so disadvantaged by not having scale that they need partnerships, they need access, they need channel fluidity. And so there is, I think for many of our audience, there is a real opportunity to just step into the next sales conversation trying to be a good doctor, trying to forget what you sell. Try and understand what they're trying to accomplish. Forget what they're trying to buy. Why are they trying to buy it? There's the old saw is an ironic term to use, but there's the old adage about people don't want to buy drill bits, they want to buy holes. And they don't even want to buy holes. They want to do something with a hole. Like, what are they trying to accomplish? And then I can figure out, do they need a nail or a screw or a drill bit in order to get through that wood? And I think that we make the mistake of, this is really my primary observation about a fundamental error of human nature, that we are selfish beasts, that if I have a hammer and I sell hammers, I think about me first, and I think about the hammer second, and I think about you third. How can I sell a hammer to Sabanjan? That is not the question to pose. The question is, put the hammer down, think about Sabanjan first, and ask, what does he need? And how can I help him achieve that? And oh my God, I have a hammer. I wonder if that could be helpful. That's a very, very counterintuitive exercise to have. And the only people well trained in this are, in my experience, healthcare professionals, because they don't know what tool to use until they understand the problem to solve. So their whole mechanism is around this deep empathy and understanding to start the conversation. The last thing you want is to go to an orthopedic surgeon, no matter what your problem is. The answer is going to be, I'm cutting and starting to use a hammer. You want an objective diagnostician. And that's, I think, the best position we can put ourselves in.
How early did sales folks get to you? I mean, one is that, okay, there is a floated RFP, people are calling you, or people are trying to reach out to you when there is some signal out there in the market that, okay, Subway is looking for X or looking for Y, or as a CMO, you're looking for some digital advertising, I don't know, tools or agencies and so on.
Yes.
So there is some signal and they're sort of following their signal and they're coming to you. But where have you seen actually people coming in really early, trying to give you inputs which you may or may not use that moment, or that month or that quarter, but they know that sooner or later this is something which will be useful for you, and they start the engagement really early. I mean, do you have some examples of that?
I do. There's a really terrific company called Mobivity that is still owner-operator-led, meaning it's entrepreneur-led. It's quite successful. Mobivity has as you can imagine, a tool around tracking mobile activity, if you will. What they did was they came to my head of digital operations, not me. No one came to me, really. They went to the person who was the decision maker, who reported to me. The advertising agencies, which were the big sort of advisor, would come to me, but otherwise I would just direct people to where they needed to go. And maybe a decision would come back to me, or I'd be informed of it. In this case, he went to the head of digital and said, "You don't seem to care about this capability yet, but I'd like it to be on your radar because you should." And a few months later, and he had my head of digital, terrific guy, Rob Tedesco, very capable, young and yet very experienced in a funny way. He had just been at it for a surprisingly long time. You know, he was one of those guys who was building computers in his garage when he was 5 years old. And so he knew everything. And Rob said, "These guys have brought me something interesting that I think we should listen to, but we don't have an application for it yet. It's very difficult to deploy because we have a franchise network. You have to basically get every franchisee on board. You have to sell everything in like a democracy. But the franchisees won't like it because it will cost them money. But I think they're going to see that they would be able to serve customers better. They'd be able to know customers, and they could differentially attract customers." And I said, "That's interesting. Who else does that?" He said, "I don't know. These guys just came out of the blue." I said, "Well, go figure out if they're the best ones to do it, and then let's have a conversation with them." So we looked around and said, "Yeah, they're at least in the top three, and everybody else, they're all startups, so it's kind of a crapshoot. I think we should be betting on the one that seems to have the best funding and the smartest leadership, et cetera." I forgot about it. 2 months later, Burger King, a primary competitor, has a big news item that gets picked up by everybody. I don't even think they were publishing it particularly. That when you drove by a Burger King, your phone would light up and say, "Free Whopper, free, pull in here." They had addressed this signal so that it would ping your phone when you were pulling into McDonald's across the street. And they gave away a lot of Whoppers, but they stole a lot of Big Macs. And what they demonstrated was they really knew who their customers could be at the point of interest. Like, I'm pulling into McDonald's, like I have intent.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I have to do a loop around. And you have these McDonald's owners who keep watching cars drive around the drive-thru and back out. Like, what's going on? Is there a detour? So they got a lot of press for that. And all of a sudden these guys came to the forefront. I was like, that's what they were talking about. So they had sort of greased the skids for us to understand that we would care about this one day, even though basically they were saying you're too dumb to get it right now, or to prioritize it and care about it. So that when the opportunity was obvious to us, we knew who to turn to. And so it was a very early introduction. And then when we turned to them, they were the most service-oriented. And he and his team are taking me for dinner and talking about where they've piloted this. They're basically giving me an update on the successes Subway is having that I don't even know about yet because it's happening on the periphery. They've sold a pilot to a franchise owner who's got a bunch of stores. They haven't even sold it to headquarters. So they've now bringing me back proof points in my own business. So I thought of that team as very savvy, very fortunate that there was a confluence of events that sort of brought it back to our attention. But they saw it was an obvious need that was a building digital capability that for sure the competitors were going to have, and I needed to be aware of it. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely.
I came in early, planted the seed, jumped on the moment of interest, much like Burger King jumped on the person when they drove into McDonald's. Mobivity jumped on me when the Burger King news came out. And of course, they emailed it to me and said,
Right.
did you see this? What did I tell you? And I was delighted to get the message. I was like, yep, okay, I'm in. I get it. Come, now it's come pitch me and we'll consider you against alternatives, but you're definitely in the driver's seat. I know you. You foresaw my future. You were the first one to reach out to me. I took your message because we know each other now. Of course, that's who we ended up working on.
That's a great story. That's a great story. The other question that I had was not related to the sales process and the buying process directly, but it was something about the way we compensate salespeople. Do you think we should actually now rethink the way we compensate our salespeople which will actually, like you said, that will set the process for them to be reoriented about the customer first and not the tool and my incentive and thereby what can I sell you this quarter or this month?
I think that how we compensate them is a secondary question. The primary question, it's important. So let me just say that's the way that we should think about it, because as the business, that's how you're spending money to make money. But the way that you compensate them is based on the metrics that matter. You need to say, what is the outcome I'm trying to achieve for my business? What kind of sales and what kind of time frame? Do I want trusted relationships? Do I want one-off sales? Do I want it fast or do I need it forever? And to do that, then what's the nature of the relationship I need to have with what kind of customer? How should I profile them? Who am I targeting? How and why? Now that I understand them, what is their buyer preference, process, method, range of complexity? And they then would say, okay, if I can map that out, and I realize it's never linear, but just make it simple for yourself. Say, what activities need to take place in order to achieve this outcome? And then what would I measure to demonstrate that that's happening? And then lastly, how would I compensate someone to induce those, to achieve those metrics, to achieve that outcome? So you're basically engineering it from scratch for what you're trying to accomplish. If you say, I'll pay you $1 every time you sell a pair of shoes, then you've got somebody who's flogging shoes. If you say, I will pay you every time you get 5 stars from a customer, well, that's different. What would I do if I were trying to earn 5 stars? And even in a simple example like that, you can imagine how you fundamentally change the behaviors of your staff.
Yeah.
Customer walks into the shoe store, 3 staff swarm them and try and latch onto them like a leech and, shuffle them to the most expensive pair of shoes versus, a team that over time starts to become much more fluid. They see that they are a team in achieving an optimal outcome. Maybe I should reward them as a team so that we're incented to be a team. Maybe teams are better than lone wolves. Well, you're not going to get team behavior if you reward lone wolves. So change the mechanism. So the reason I was saying the compensation is secondary is because I've got a lot of machinery to figure out that basically comes down to the metrics that matter. And now I incent that by paying you to achieve them or rewarding you in some way. It's not necessarily pay. It can be your progress is based on, your promotions will be based on hitting these metrics. I may pay you a flat salary, right? And what I really want are 5 stars. The Zappos model in the shoe arena is a really good example of we're just going to go for service. When they started that company, they didn't even have shoes in inventory. They just started selling pictures of shoes and then we go buy them retail and sell them at a loss so that they can learn what customers wanted.
True.
Understand the customer. Critical.
This is one problem that needs discussion, which is how to incentivize, and should you at all incentivize individuals? Because what's wrong with the marketing guy who is doing a great job? What's wrong with the production guy who is producing this great?
Yeah, why don't we do this with sales guys? Yeah.
Exactly. That's the point.
That's a very good point.
Right?
Yeah.
So should we incentivize the entire company if we have done a good year's job or a good quarter's job? Or should we just incentivize those guys who are going out and getting revenue? What is so different about the guys who are getting revenue vis-a-vis the guys who are designing a new product?
It is a strange thing that, quota-driven and bonus-based selling became the model in just one function.
Yeah.
You're right. We don't do it for the car designer. But if you design the car that becomes the most popular car in the world, you do have benefits, but they're much more obscure. And it's very interesting.
The Buyer Side Chat is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink enables high-quality interactions between buyers and sellers through presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create personalized sales presentations and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversation. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 650-847-5884. That is 650-847-5884. I think this is a function of the industrial era where we figured out mass manufacturing first and then we wanted to go and sell it. We never knew who is going to buy it and how they're going to buy it and so on.
Right,
so
right.
I think it has a link to that I suddenly have 100,000 pieces of X and I have produced it at for Y pennies or dollars. Now I need to figure out how to sell it at Y plus whatever. And whoever does it best, I will incentivize you to do that and do it by hook or by crook. And that's okay. I think sort of that legacy is sort of continuing, but we'll, as you said, we'll leave it for another discussion, and we must talk again. We must talk again, Roger. I really appreciate your time. I enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope you did too.
Very much. Thank you very much. I think it's a very useful exercise that you're engaged in here. I think we have a lot of work to do to transform the relationship between companies and customers by really helping people think differently about what is an outdated model, in my view.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
We have a fantastic lineup over the next couple of episodes, unraveling in depth how the real buyers buy. Stay tuned. Thank you for being with us today on the Buyer Side Chat. This is the podcast of record for the buyer side journey. And those who know, that's the journey that matters. We hope this conversation helped you with insights that you can go and apply right now to your own value transaction process. See you in the next episode of the Buyer Side Chat.